I've always believed in living by a simple philosophy. Live and let live. Mind your business. I'll mind mine. For 3 peaceful years, this approach served me well in Willow Creek Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone minded their own affairs. That was until Linda Blackwell moved in. Linda arrived like a storm cloud rolling into an otherwise sunny day. With her designer sunglasses perched atop her perfectly highlighted blonde bob, her Mercedes SUV gleaming under the sun, and her clipboard checklists clutched tightly in hand, she bought the largest house in the development, a sprawling Tudor that had sat unsold for nearly a year due to its astronomical price tag. Within weeks, she began attending every HOA meeting, questioning financial decisions, suggesting improvements to community standards, and positioning herself as the voice of authority. When our elderly HOA president, Harold Wilson, stepped down due to health issues, Linda seized the opportunity and ran unopposed for the position. Most of us didn't pay much attention. We figured one leader was as good as another. How wrong we were. My name is Alex Reynolds, 37, a graphic designer who works from home. After my divorce, I purchased a modest colonial-style house in Willow Creek Estates as a fresh start, a place to rebuild my life and find some peace. For 3 years, that's exactly what I had. Friendly neighbors who respected privacy, kids who knew they could count on me for Halloween candy, and an HOA that mostly stayed out of our way. But all of that changed when Linda became president. The trouble started over something seemingly trivial, the color of my house. When I bought it, the exterior was painted a traditional colonial blue with white trim, nothing controversial. Last summer, I decided it needed a refresh. After weeks of browsing paint samples, I settled on a deeper navy blue, still paired with white trim. The change was subtle. You might not even notice unless you saw before and after photos, but it gave the house a fresher, more contemporary look. Following protocol, I submitted a formal paint color request form to the HOA, complete with exact swatches and product codes. 3 weeks passed without a response, which, according to the bylaws, meant automatic approval. So, I hired painters, spent a hefty sum, and repainted the house. It looked fantastic, and several neighbors complimented the update. 2 days later, disaster struck. A neon orange violation notice was taped to my front door. Unauthorized exterior modification. According to the notice, I had 14 days to restore the original color or face daily fines of $100. Confused, I called the number listed and found myself speaking directly to Linda. "This must be a mistake," I explained. "I submitted the color change request over a month ago and never received a denial." According to the bylaws, that constitutes automatic approval after 21 days. "Mr. Reynolds," Linda replied, her voice dripping with condescension, "I reviewed your application personally. The color you've painted your house is navy blue, not colonial blue, and navy is not on the approved color palette for Willow Creek Estates." "The difference is minimal," I countered, "and the bylaws state that if a color is within 2 shades of an approved color, it falls within acceptable parameters." "That's your interpretation," Linda snapped. "As HOA president, I have final say on aesthetic matters, and I've determined your house color is not compliant. You have 14 days to repaint to the original color." "I followed the procedures and received automatic approval through non-response," I insisted. "I'm not repainting a perfectly good house that's already cost me thousands of dollars." "Then prepare for fines of $100 per day after the 14-day grace period," she replied crisply. "And Mr. Reynolds, I suggest you check the newly updated bylaws. The automatic approval clause was removed last month." After hanging up, I immediately checked the HOA website. Sure enough, there had been a quiet update to the bylaws, though I'd never received any notification of the changes, which I was pretty sure violated state HOA regulations. The automatic approval clause had indeed been replaced with language granting the board president discretionary authority on all aesthetic decisions. Over the next few days, I researched my options and discovered that under state law, HOA bylaw changes required proper notice to all homeowners and usually a vote. I drafted a formal appeal letter citing the relevant statutes and hand-delivered copies to each HOA board member, including Linda. I also reached out to a few neighbors, many of whom were equally concerned once I pointed out the stealthy bylaw changes. Then came the twist I never saw coming. While I was away on a 3-day business trip to Chicago, my neighbor Sarah, a retired teacher in her 60s with a no-nonsense attitude, kept an eye on my house. When I returned late Friday evening, she hurried over as I pulled into my driveway. "Alex, thank goodness you're back," she said, her expression troubled. "Something strange has been going on. Linda has been circling your house multiple times a day, taking photos and making notes. She brought some men in a white van to look at your exterior yesterday. They were discussing paint samples." Too tired to process this fully, I thanked Sarah and went inside to unpack. I assumed Linda was gathering evidence or documenting the violation more thoroughly. I decided to deal with it in the morning. But Saturday morning brought a scene straight out of a surreal nightmare. At 10:30 a.m., as I sipped coffee and caught up on emails, my doorbell rang. It was Sarah again, looking flustered. "Alex, you need to come outside right now. Linda is here with a painting crew, and they're setting up ladders against your house." I rushed outside in my pajama pants and t-shirt to find an incredible spectacle unfolding. Linda, dressed in crisp white capri pants and a baby blue polo shirt, was directing 2 men in painter's coveralls who were indeed setting up equipment alongside my house. A van, labeled Peterson's Professional Painting, was parked in my driveway, and several buckets of paint were lined up on my lawn. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, walking straight up to Linda. She turned, not even having the grace to look embarrassed. "Mr. Reynolds, you were informed that your house color is non-compliant. The 14-day grace period expired yesterday, and as per Section 12.4 of the bylaws, the HOA now has the right to remedy violations and bill the homeowner for the cost." "I filed an appeal," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "And I was out of town on business, which you would know if you'd bothered to check before sending painters to trespass on my property." "Your appeal was denied," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "And your travel plans are not the HOA's concern. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to get started. The original colonial blue color will be restored by the end of the day." "This is illegal," I stated flatly. "You cannot just show up and paint someone's house without their consent. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Linda replied with a smirk. "I've already spoken with the county sheriff's office about enforcing our bylaws. They're well aware that HOAs have the legal right to remedy violations." As this confrontation unfolded, a small crowd of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, watching with expressions ranging from disbelief to concern. My next-door neighbor Ben, a lawyer who worked for the district attorney's office, was filming the interaction on his phone. "Linda," Ben called out, walking over to join us. "I've reviewed the bylaws pretty thoroughly, and I don't see any provision that allows for this kind of action without a court order." Section 12.4 clearly states, Linda began. "It states the HOA can hire contractors to remedy certain violations after due process and proper notice," Ben interrupted. "But it specifically lists landscaping, trash removal, and broken fixtures. House painting is not included. And furthermore, there's a requirement for a formal hearing before the board, which hasn't occurred." Linda's face flushed. As president, I have emergency enforcement powers. No, you don't, another voice chimed in. It was Raj Patel, a fellow HOA board member. Linda, the board never approved this action. You can't unilaterally decide to paint someone's house. I seized the moment. Gentlemen, I addressed the painters, I appreciate that you've been hired for a job, but I am the legal owner of this property, and I do not consent to any painting. If you proceed, it will constitute trespassing and vandalism, and I will press charges. The painters exchanged uncertain glances between me and Linda. We were told this was authorized, one of them said hesitantly. It's not, I stated firmly, and I have witnesses and video evidence that I have explicitly denied permission. Ben held up his phone meaningfully, still recording. The lead painter turned to Linda. Ma'am, we can't proceed if the homeowner objects. It's against company policy and potentially illegal. We'll need to reschedule until this is resolved. Linda's face contorted with anger. I've put down a non-refundable deposit. Your company assured me you could handle this job today. We can handle painting, the painter replied calmly, but we don't get involved in property disputes. You'll need to sort this out and call us when everyone's on the same page. With that, the painters began packing up their equipment. Linda turned to me, fury evident in every line of her face. This isn't over, Reynolds. The fine starts today. 100 per day until your house is compliant. Actually, Raj interjected, as treasurer of the board, I can't authorize any fines without a majority vote, which hasn't happened. And Linda, we need to have a serious conversation about your actions today. As the painters drove away and the neighbors continued to watch the drama unfold, Linda stormed off to her car, slamming the door with enough force to make everyone wince. The gathered neighbors slowly dispersed, many stopping to express their support for me and their concerns about Linda's leadership. Ben approached me, shaking his head. That was something else. You know, if she had actually started painting that, it would have been criminal property damage. I can't believe she thought this would work. I replied, still somewhat in shock. Power goes to some people's heads. Listen, Ben said, lowering his voice. I'd suggest installing some security cameras if you don't already have them. I wouldn't put it past her to try something when you're not around. It was excellent advice, and I acted on it immediately. That afternoon, I purchased and installed a comprehensive security camera system that covered all sides of my house, driveway, and front porch. The system sent alerts to my phone when it detected motion and stored footage in the cloud. I made sure the cameras were visible enough to serve as a deterrent, but discreet enough not to be eyesores. The next day, Raj called to inform me that he had called an emergency board meeting to address Linda's actions. He asked if I would attend to present my side of the situation, which I agreed to do. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at the community center. In the meantime, I continued to document everything. Dated photos of my house, saved emails and notices, and a detailed log of every interaction. I also printed out the relevant state laws regarding HOA governance and bylaw modifications. On Tuesday afternoon, my security system sent an alert to my phone while I was working. The front camera showed Linda standing on my porch, placing another notice on my door. I waited until she left, then checked the notice. Another violation, this time claiming my front garden beds were improperly maintained and required immediate attention. The beds were immaculate, with fresh mulch I'd put down just last month. Later that same afternoon, I received 3 more security alerts. Each time, it was Linda walking around my property, taking photos with her phone. On her final circuit, she spent several minutes examining my newly installed security cameras. Her expression soured when she realized their presence. She looked directly into one camera, and I swear I could almost see the wheels turning in her head as she realized she was being recorded. Wednesday evening arrived, and the community center was packed for the emergency board meeting. It seemed word had spread about the attempted forced painting, and homeowners were keenly interested in the outcome. The 5-member board sat at a table at the front of the room, with Linda in the center as president. She looked composed but tense, dressed in a conservative pantsuit as if for battle. Raj called the meeting to order and explained its purpose: to address concerns about recent enforcement actions taken by the HOA president without board approval. He then invited me to speak. I presented my case calmly and methodically, sticking to the facts. I explained my proper submission of the paint color change, the lack of timely response constituting automatic approval under the bylaws that were in effect at the time, and the subsequent unannounced changes to those bylaws. I detailed Linda's escalating actions, culminating in the attempt to paint my house without consent. I presented my documentation, including Ben's video of the confrontation, which was played for everyone to see. The room was silent as they watched Linda on the screen, clearly stating her intention to paint my house against my explicit objections. When the video ended, there was a murmur of disapproval from the assembly. Then came the moment that changed everything. I played footage from my security cameras showing Linda's multiple visits to my property, clearly trespassing as she wandered around my yard taking photos. The timestamp showed she had been there as recently as that morning, when I was at a coffee shop working remotely. What was most concerning, I concluded, was discovering this on my security footage from yesterday afternoon. I played the final clip, which showed Linda approaching my garage with what appeared to be a small can and a brush in her hand. She looked around furtively, then opened the can and painted a small patch of navy blue on my previously pristine white garage door. She took a photo of it, then quickly walked away. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Linda shot to her feet. "That's doctored footage," she shouted. "He's manipulated that video to frame me." Raj called for order, his face grave. "Linda, the metadata on these video files can be verified by experts if necessary. Are you denying that's you in the footage?" "I was conducting an inspection," she insisted. "As for the paint, I was merely taking a sample to match for color compliance purposes." "By painting it onto my garage door?" I asked incredulously. Ben stood up from the audience. "As an officer of the court, I feel obligated to point out that what we just witnessed on that video constitutes criminal vandalism and potentially filing a false report, since Linda subsequently issued a violation notice for damage she herself caused." Another board member, a quiet man named Tom, who rarely spoke at meetings, cleared his throat. "I move that we immediately suspend Linda from her position as president, pending a full investigation of these allegations." "Second," said the fourth board member, Lisa. "This is absurd," Linda protested. "I've done nothing but try to maintain our community standards and property values." Raj called for a vote. 4 hands went up in favor of suspension. Only Linda's remained down. "The motion carries," Raj announced. "Linda Blackwell is suspended from the position of HOA president effective immediately. As vice president, I will assume temporary leadership until this matter is resolved." Linda grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting, but not before turning to deliver a parting shot. "You'll all regret this when your property values plummet because people like him," she jabbed a finger in my direction, "are allowed to paint their houses whatever garish colors they want." The door slammed behind her, and there was a moment of awkward silence before Raj continued the meeting. The board voted to rescind all violation notices issued by Linda in the past 30 days, pending review, restore the original bylaws until proper procedures for amendments could be followed, and form a committee to review the HOA's governance structure. As the meeting adjourned, numerous neighbors approached me to express their support and share their own stories of run-ins with Linda. It seemed she had been on quite the violation spree since taking office, targeting everything from the wrong shade of mailbox to unauthorized bird feeders. The following week was surprisingly quiet. Linda's suspension had been formalized in a letter from the HOA's attorney, barring her from acting in any official capacity. I fixed the small patch of paint she had applied to my garage door, and my security cameras detected no further trespassers. 10 days after the meeting, Ben knocked on my door one evening. "Thought you'd want to know," he said without preamble. "Linda is being charged with criminal mischief and trespassing. The DA's office decided to pursue it after reviewing your footage and similar complaints from 3 other homeowners who apparently also had security cameras. One caught her removing slats from their fence to create a violation." I was surprised the authorities had taken it so seriously. I just wanted her to leave me alone, not necessarily end up with a criminal record. Ben shrugged. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But if it makes you feel better, she'll probably get a plea deal with community service and restitution. The real punishment for someone like Linda is the public embarrassment." He was right about that. The local community paper ran a small story about an HOA president facing charges for falsifying violations, which was then picked up by one of those viral homeowner nightmare websites. Though Linda wasn't named in the articles, everyone in Willow Creek Estates knew who it was about. 3 weeks later, Linda's Tudor house had a "for sale" sign in the front yard. Under Rage's level-headed leadership, the HOA underwent significant restructuring. The bylaws were simplified, the violation process was made more transparent with multiple levels of review, and a new online system allowed homeowners to track the status of any architectural requests or complaints in real time. I was asked to join the new Architectural Review Committee, which I accepted on the condition that we create a more diverse and contemporary-approved color palette. The committee agreed, and we spent a productive Saturday with a professional color consultant creating an expanded range of options that respected the neighborhood's character while allowing for more personal expression. 6 months after the incident, Linda's house finally sold for significantly less than she had paid for it. On moving day, I made a point of being outside working in my yard, thinking she might want one final confrontation. Instead, she avoided eye contact, directing the movers with far less of her former imperious manner. As the moving truck pulled away, my neighbor Sarah walked over from across the street. "Good riddance," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Do you know what she told me when she first moved in? That my rose bushes were chaotic, and I should consider something more structured like boxwoods. My award-winning roses that I've been tending for 20 years. I laughed. Well, the new owners seem nice. A young couple with a baby on the way. They came by yesterday to introduce themselves and ask about the neighborhood. "Did you warn them about the HOA?" Sarah asked with a wink. "I told them it's under new management," I replied, much more reasonable these days. Under Raj's leadership, the focus shifted from punitive enforcement to community building. The funds previously earmarked for violation processing were redirected to improving the playground and adding a community garden. The annual block party, which had dwindled in recent years, was revived with enthusiastic participation. As for my navy blue house, it became something of a symbol in Willow Creek Estates, a reminder that sometimes you have to stand your ground against unreasonable authority. Several other homeowners, emboldened by my small act of resistance, submitted color change requests under the new expanded palette. Our once uniform neighborhood gradually developed more character and individuality, while still maintaining the overall harmony that protected our property values. I kept my security cameras installed, though they rarely captured anything more exciting than the occasional delivery person or wandering neighborhood cat. They served as a reminder that sometimes the best defense against overreach is simply paying attention and having evidence on your side. The following spring, I decided to paint my front door a bright, cheerful yellow, properly submitted and promptly approved by the architectural committee, of course. As I was applying the final coat, the new HOA president stopped by on his evening walk. "Looking good, Alex," Raj said, admiring the contrast against the navy blue. "You know, if Linda could see this, she'd probably have an aneurysm." I laughed, stepping back to check my work. Sometimes a little color is exactly what a neighborhood needs. "Couldn't agree more," he replied. "Hey, we're still looking for someone to chair the 4th of July picnic committee. If you're interested." "I might be," I said, "as long as there are no clipboard checklists involved." Raj chuckled. "No clipboards, no power trips, just neighbors enjoying each other's company. That's the kind of HOA I want to run." As he continued on his walk, I put the final touches on my yellow door, thinking about how differently things had turned out than Linda had intended. She had tried to control every aspect of our community through fear and intimidation, only to unite us against her overreach. In trying to paint my house her way, she had inadvertently helped us create a more colorful, vibrant neighborhood than ever before. And the best part? It was all perfectly within the bylaws,